Okay. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Hoc River Committee, the special meeting. We are in budget season, so many of my colleagues are currently at the Budget and Finance Committee. I think Tom LeBarge, our council member, the greatest charity of Los Angeles, is on his way, but I'm having the aftermath of the St. Patrick's Parade, so I think he's still waving his hand somewhere. But he could be joining us any second now. It should be a relatively short meeting today, but I think it's very important because it speaks to our ability to maintain momentum. I was fortunate to spend some time this past week with the National League of Cities in Washington, D.C., and spend some time with Colonel Magnus, who is the lead colonel for the Army Corps of Engineers. And Carol from our bureau was there, and they did a fantastic job in presenting to the congressional delegation. Many of the folks who represent parts of Southern California as Congress members were present at the meeting. They heard the great presentation from our city family. So thank you, Carol, and thank you, Gary, for your great work. It's very obvious to us that there is strong interest from the Army Corps, from Congress, from the feds. And see, they agree, the elements are with us. And the fact is, we need to maintain that momentum in trying to achieve very effective collaboration with our county officials and county government, and you know, we will work through that. Plus all the different tools that we are creating here today. And that's what I believe is the subject of today's meeting, is to get a sense of how we are progressing. So that being said, could we have the summary of the first item, please?
Item number 1 are Bureau of Engineering reports relative to Los Angeles River Project Office, City Planning Department progress reports on the Los Angeles River Revitalization Master Plan implementation, and Community Redevelopment Agency reports on the proposed Los Angeles River Revitalization Corporation.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Councilman Reyes. I'm Carol Armstrong from the Bureau of Engineering River Project Office.
Great.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
I'm going to go through the progress report for the River Project Office.
Okay.
First of all, we've been working on the River Authority with the County of Los Angeles, and unfortunately the last 2 meetings were canceled by the county on January 30th and February 27th. They've been going through some staff changes over there, so they're kind of in flux, but we are on track for our next meeting, which is next week on March 26th.
Great.
Both the city and the county are internally reviewing drafts of the River Authority agreement, and the county has also asked us to jointly consider a recreational master use agreement. And the city staff right now is working with the city attorney's office to come up with a draft of that, which we will share with the county. We do have a few project-specific recreational use agreements at the county right now that they're considering. 2 in Council District 2 for the Laurel Grove Pedestrian Bridge and Bikeway, and then 1 for the West Valley Phase 2 Bikeway. And we would like to get the West Valley Phase 2 Bikeway completed as soon as possible so that we can guarantee that we receive funds from the state on time.
Now that's Councilman Gruel's district?
The last one, the West Valley Phase 2, is actually Council District 3, Zine.
I see.
Councilman Zine.
Okay.
And regarding the River Foundation, we have finalized a work plan and cost proposal for the foundation, and we have issued a notice to proceed to our consultant. And work on the River Foundation will involve focus group meetings. And so we expect to commence that work by the end of this month.
Can you see us being in a place where we can expedite the foundation so that we can accept donations by July 2008? Is that conceivable?
I don't know. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one.
Let's shoot for that, because
Okay.
we have been speaking to different groups, entities, and it would be great to not keep them waiting,
Okay.
because I know we've been cooking this for a while. So,
Okay.
so at the next meeting, give me, or just let me know when you think we can do that in writing. That'd be great.
Okay. I will do that.
Okay.
And also the River Revitalization Corporation, our colleagues at the Community Redevelopment Agency are here to report. They have been great and very active in the city task force meetings, having reported in January, February, and March. Our city task force meetings were January 8th, February 5th, and March 4th, and our next one is April 1st.
Okay.
Next, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Ecosystem Feasibility Study. They are lacking funds, and they need funds from the federal government in order to continue. And so we're working with our legislators in Washington to encourage them to appropriate some funds for the Army Corps' budget so that they can continue with the feasibility study. And as you know, we are also working with our legislators in Washington to encourage appropriations for the Water Resources Development Act demonstration project, which we'd all like to see happen in the not-too-distant future. Lastly, river projects. We're working with the California Coastal Conservancy on doing a Green Street. Good afternoon, Councilman LeBlanc.
We've just been joined by Councilmember Tom LeBlanc. Happy St. Patrick's Day,
You
sir.
too. Thank you very
The
much.
great parade that's out there.
Thank you.
I apologize, couldn't get there, but
Next year, we want to float for the
great
river.
fan.
Is that what it is, Chairman?
If we can have the river to float on. I'm just
Exactly.
kidding. Okay, go
You
ahead.
can dye it green like the Chicago River.
Yeah. One day.
So back to green streets. We are working on a Green Street project. We are looking at Riverdale Avenue in Elysian Valley to do this Green Street project, and we've been speaking with the Coastal Conservancy about that. They are giving us $500,000 for a Green Street project. We are also working with the Department of Water and Power to develop a design for the Rio Vista Eco-Technology Campus on their site, the Main Street Yard, along Leroy Street, which is across from William Meade Housing. We are going to put an architect on board in the next 2 weeks, and we should have a design shortly thereafter.
Great.
We think our timeline is about 8 weeks for that. Also, we've been working with ad hoc committee staff on the future of the website and some changes that we can make because we still have all the content from the master plan, but that needs to be updated, and it needs to be more of a living site than it. Right now, it's kind of archival. We've also been working with the planning department on the Rio, and Claire's going to give that update. Staff did a presentation to the Korean Culture Center, a group of Korean Americans, on February 20th. We visited with a delegation from Tel Aviv, Israel, at Taylor Yard on March 5th. And River Project Office staff did a presentation to the Los Angeles section of the American Society of Civil Engineers on March 12th. And we are looking forward to a visit from congressional members on March 20th.
Right. Big time.
Lastly, we have completed the river brochure.
Great job. Great job on the brochure. In terms of the, when you look at the outline in terms of which projects will be prioritized, in the overall feasibility study, that's a detail that I would hope we can see as we go through that process.
Absolutely.
I like to keep in front of us that this committee would be that place that we can discuss these issues, move things forward. But we can do it if we understand what's actually going on out there. For example, on the green streets, how we look at a critical mass so that folks can see that there is a trend that is occurring and it's having impact because it's either concentrated or it has a systems approach that allows us to see a difference and feel a difference. So, for example, Parcel C, that development and design with the previous DOT director, we had a great meeting with BOE and DOT and planning and building and safety, and we talked about what those streets could look like. And it was very obvious between all the departments that we were going to have to adjust some of our building codes, some of our planning language. Planning was there that day. And it was with the previous DOT director. But now she's gone, we have a new person. And the continuum of those commitments need to stay intact. So that project is making its way through the MTA process because they're leasing that land. It's 18 acres. So it's 18 acres of streets, infrastructure, housing, commercial, where the green streets approach would be rather profound. Instead of like one street or two streets, that way people can actually see and we can really see the results. So I would hope we can see that in a report. In terms of River Authority, is that online to be established this year? How are we moving? And Can you just give us a status and what's delaying this?
Yes, we're hoping to still see this established by the end of 2008.
Great.
We did not anticipate that the meetings would be canceled by the county or that they would have the staff change that they've had. And we did not anticipate that they would also want to consider jointly the recreational master use agreement. However, given all of that, we still think that we can finish by the end of 2008.
Great.
We are going to hit up against some very serious issues quickly: river management, maintenance, liability, security, and all those things. But we anticipated that we would. And so it's going to take a lot of partnership building on the part of the city and the county. And as you know, the Corps is also very supportive of our efforts,
Right.
and has agreed to host the next large group meeting.
Right. And I want to be diplomatic when I say this, but there comes a time when you have internal discussion, but a realization occurs where maybe the decision makers, either within the departments, whether it's the CAOs or the CLAs of both jurisdictions or the elected officials, can come to terms of what we want to do, and kind of like throwing some type of relief or a lifesaver, if you will, to these junctures that don't seem to move. If there's a block there, how can we get through that impasse? And instead of going in that circle, maybe that's something we need to have, we have to come to grips with. And if we're there, then we should know that.
Yeah,
And-
absolutely.
And
We
that's
will make
something
sure
we
that
should
it's
have,
informed.
that discussion.
Okay.
But I hate for us to keep trying and knowing we're running into roadblocks or we're being sent to dead ends for the different reasons that may exist.
Right.
And so I want to be complimentary and supportive of the county, give them all the credit they deserve for all the great work they're doing. But this has to be a partnership, and we have to figure out how to move that.
Right. Thank you.
So we'll have that internal discussion. I'll stop there. Councilman Labange, any questions for Carroll Public Works?
I just think that
Engineering?
achieving our goal will be as we take the steps and start one block at a time and really do it that way. Because you could get overwhelmed as an agency trying to change this. But as you do that one block at a time, all of a sudden it makes a difference. Just recently I was touring Elysian Valley, and it's amazing how many pocket parks that have been created by the Santa Monica Conservancy and others, just in a number of locations. And all of a sudden you string them together, and what do you got?
Right.
What was that song? You know, Bibbly Bobbly Boo. Remember that from the, what was that from? What was that from, man? I know it's Disney, but name the movie. Yeah. In the sound of my voice, a free tour of Los Angeles by Tom LaBonge. What's the name of that movie? Come up to room 1060 and tell me. Bibbly Bobbly. But I think that's the only way we're going to achieve it. And also with this budget crisis that we're going in, I think that's, going to make people say we can't do any extras. But I think we have to do extras all over in order. That's what we live for. If we wanted to not do extras, we can't do it. I would like to know, though, Mr. Chair, if we could identify a university, whether it's Cal Poly Pomona, whether it's USC or UCLA, Northridge or Long Beach State, or maybe divide the river at some point and say, Northridge, get involved between Griffith Park North, and USC, get involved between Griffith Park and something, or whatever,
Different sectors?
or just to say we could use their expertise and do school projects that will give us a running start, so if there is something in the future, it could be easier for you to start doing it. So that's just the only suggestion that I have, and
Okay.
that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good one.
In terms of green streets, I did want to make one point. I want to make sure that this committee has that opportunity to review and approve any green street designations as soon as you have a list. I think that'll help us look at how the different council office can coordinate that and move in a direction that, again, creates a critical mass. So I don't want to create another layer of approvals, but I think we all know what we're doing. We don't surprise any council office, and we make sure the council office is involved in terms of the community politics that come with that. And so that's something I'm hoping we can establish. Can I get that commitment from you?
Sure, absolutely. Any river
Okay.
project we'll bring here before the committee. And regarding green streets, I think Claire's going to say more about
Okay.
the Rio and
Okay.
how they fit into the Rio.
Okay, so those are all my BOE questions. I have more for Sierra and City Planning, but City Planning, would you like to do your presentation? And thank you for your hard work, Carol. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank
Yeah,
you. I also wanted to just first introduce you to Deborah Cahan, who's recently joined our river unit. So we are now our
Oh, great.
full unit again. So Deborah's right here. So I just wanted to introduce her.
That's right, we met it. Oh, good.
I'll just-
Well, welcome aboard.
I'll keep this brief, but we've got a couple of things to report. First of all, thank you for joining us on the meeting on February 23rd on the Cornfields Arroyo Seco specific plan. It was terrific to have you there and appreciate that very much. We had a wonderful workshop. I think got a lot of good feedback from the community, and so we're working hard to move that plan forward to be able to go back to the community in the next couple of months was a draft specific plan.
It was exciting to see the stakeholders, but it was more exciting to see property owners who've taken on planners and architects and are already going through the urban design concepts of what the properties could mean for the riverfront district. And that to me is inspiring because now it's just not only a bunch of talk and, sound bites. These are real people with real land that are willing to invest. So that was, I thought, a very pivotal point.
I mean, I think really the key with the specific plan will be to ensure that we create implementation tools and with the new zoning and with also marrying new zoning benefits, also public benefits to make sure that we got something that's implementable that also achieves all the different goals that the community and the city envision for the area. So.
And I assume that layer of work will be in concert with the community plan process that is going hand in hand, or how are we looking at that?
No, that's a good question. The two community plans that the specific plan straddles are not community plans that are being updated currently, although the Central City North Community Plan will start to be updated in the near future. The specific plan is envisioned to be done in advance of those community plans. So
Right.
we will have to just make some modifications, amendments to the community plans at the same time we adopt the specific plan.
Okay, and that, I believe, is going to be a concept in terms of delivery of the type of language that would influence these documents. But it means we have to fold in the community stakeholders so they understand that relationship.
Absolutely.
Because once we get out there with the community plan, they'll say, well, what about the specific plan work we already did?
Right.
So that's just something that, it's a small detail, but it's a critical one in how we get credibility from the community.
Absolutely. And we've already been in touch with the community planner who's going to be doing the Central City North Community Plan, and we'll work with him closer as he starts to do his initial outreach, which will start sometime in the beginning of the next fiscal year.
Fantastic.
We'll work hand in hand in that. So just wanted to share with you a little bit briefly on the Rio. We have been kind of slugging along here. We're getting close. It's actually with the city attorney's office right now looking at the environmental so
Beautiful.
that we can get out for public comment period, hopefully very shortly, and move this to CPC. But you do have in front of you what is the most current draft, and we're going to get it up on our website very shortly. I wanted to just call your attention to kind of a new piece of it. The Rio has always included what we call a point system, which is the property improvement guidelines for the private properties. And we always had complete street guidelines, which we've now kind of divided into two sections. We have complete green street standards and complete green street guidelines. And the intention with that was, I think, really to address a lot of the concerns you just mentioned in terms of green streets and how we really start to ensure that we can capture kind of all the improvements we think are necessary in the full 32 miles. We recognize that there's a lot of things that we can do that are very, very, they're small steps, but that incrementally will have tremendous impact in terms of making the area more walkable. So by requiring new projects to put a street light for every a pedestrian scale street light for every 50 feet of their frontage, to put a tree in their area, to include a bike rack in front of their property. So those are little things, and we're saying instead of those just being guidelines, we're going to incorporate those as part of our street, complete green street standards.
Yeah.
I don't. That's right there by the.
Oh, it's Taylor Yard.
Yeah, this is Riverside Bridge.
Sorry, got distracted here.
That's-
we were amazed by your pictures.
Reading your report.
You know that Taylor Yard Tower, on where you have 5-1, Tom was just
Right.
looking at this.
It was moved from its place there.
Right.
By the freeway. The freeway bridge is here now.
But see, that point
Oh,
is,
that one, yeah.
that tower used to be in front of the Home Depot today.
Right.
It used to be there, and after we won the lawsuit with the MTA, we required that they move that tower to where you see it today. So we moved it 6-7 blocks up San Fernando Road, because that was the switching tower where everyone controlled when the trains came in and out.
Ah.
Right.
So
But it had a name on the side of the tower, and I'd have a
Was
picture in
Dayton
my archive.
Tower.
Dayton.
Dayton.
Yeah, Dayton Tower, but they took the name off. I should have thought
Right.
they kept it. But anyway, it's good.
anyway, sorry, went off
Okay,
off
but
a tangent there.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I mean, basically, all the streets in the entire Rio area are going to be designated as complete green streets.
Good.
Just know that we just need implementation tools to ensure that over time, and that's why by having the standards in place, that will start to move us in that direction. And we will also have the complete green street guidelines for larger projects that are coming in for discretionary action. The decision maker will have the opportunity to impose some of these guidelines as mitigation measures to offset the environmental impacts of those projects.
So the parcel C process went through. We need to regroup there, correct? We need to regroup with DOT, yourselves, and everyone involved in implementing that plan.
Right. So we have a meeting set up for this week.
Okay, good.
Do that.
All right. Fantastic.
Yeah, but they would be subject to all of these as well.
Yes.
So, and
Yes.
because that was coming in for discretionary action, that provides an opportunity to kind of use these, as a test case.
Okay. Fantastic. This is great work, and I appreciate the images. It reinforces the flood control element and the priority we have to making sure we don't flood our communities in this process. So, beautiful. Any questions?
Just a
Councilman?
question. Have you had opportunity to meet your counterpart, let's say in Denver or Tempe or other parts of the country?
I have not.
Personally? Yeah, I think if we could
I'm willing to
sometime.
take a
I know.
tour.
Yeah, but I think we should try to get the river team out to other places if we could. I know, again, we just got to be creative, but I think when you see other places, you can go. And I think the history of Denver, I think it was Denver Mayor Webb who started the interest in the river, and then the next mayor didn't get interested. Now this mayor is very interested, so
Yeah.
it's going to be a long haul, but I think you may be here longer than all of us in the sense that
Don't reinforce that, Tom.
I don't want to. I don't want to. I hope God keeps it. Every day is a blessing. But I think it would be good to see that.
Right. I
You
actually
know.
have been to Denver. I didn't meet my counterpart there, but we did
Right.
tour as part of the River Master Plan effort.
But even locally on the San
The Guadalupe.
San Gabriel River, and to look at some places locally, see if anybody's doing anything locally for that. And I read something, it was CNN, and I forget which university it was, but they took a wetlands, and you would have been proud of how they took it. It was in Tennessee, I think, where they really recreated everything, which I think is the value of what you're steering this committee to. I have one question about
Sure.
in our item here, but I don't know
Yeah.
if this is the time here.
Go ahead. I mean,
But Madam Clerk, my attendance has been good pretty much to this committee. Is correct?
That's correct.
But in the proposal here, it doesn't have in these appointing authorities, it doesn't have the chairman of the Arts and Parks Committee, and the rivers part parks in some respect here. So I know the Plum Committee chair should be have an appointing authority, and you have some others. The president of the council, who I know is off ill today, but are we voting on this proposal today to?
no.
All right, on the appointing authority, I think the chairman of the city's Arts and Parks Committee Council should have an appointment
Gotcha.
on that. And I think also I'd say too, the smaller the committee, meaning the 5 to 7, the better, as opposed to 14, or whatever it is. The smaller the committee, the more committed, and I think they can move a little better. But I just wanted to get that for the record and
No, I appreciate
have
that.
the clerk reinforce my attendance, so I knew I was worthy of the selection. There we go.
Absolutely, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay. In terms of what's one last point? And we have the CRA coming up. It'll come to you right now, but I just forgot. But thank you.
Great.
Hmm.
And has planning been on Channel 35 to talk about this?
No.
Okay, so I think that would be good too, because when they start hearing your voice, and seeing the work of the committee, I think it helps reinforce everything that's going on. So maybe coordinating through Mr. Reyes's office, you can get that time slot when they have it, because there's a real office there. There's something really people could point
Yeah.
to. All this is becoming real. It's not just a dream. It's not just a piece of paper. So I think those would be good to advance it as we move forward.
Thank you, Tom.
Great.
Thank you, Tom. That's good.
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Labange, Cecilia Estolano, Chief Executive Officer of the Community Redevelopment Agency. We were tasked with advising the committee on formation of a corporation, the River Revitalization Corporation, the powers of the corporation formation, the composition, the work program, and all of that. And we've made previous presentations to you in the past. Just briefly, we are on target assuming that the appointing authorities make the appointments, to have the River Corporation operational by July 2008.
Great.
And let me tell you kind of where we've been. We understand that the committee, in working with the mayor's office, have worked out a structure of 7 directors on the board, or somewhere between, but I think 7. 3 appointed by the council, 3 appointed by the mayor, and 1 appointed by the chair of the Ad Hoc River Committee. The composition of the council appointees does not really have anything to do with the CRA, but we think that that type of structure and a smaller rather than larger corporation makes a lot of sense for efficiency standpoint. We've also provided a list of suggested backgrounds for the board members, the types of expertise, real estate development, urban design, those kinds of expertise that we think would be helpful, but really to underscore the prominence of the individuals on the corporation will be critical, because they need to be able to draw tremendous attention to the work of the corporation and be able to attract resources to its work. Third, to really get this thing started, we know we need to do the formation documents, and the CRA will be fronting the cost of retaining outside counsel to do the
Right.
formation of the corporation. And we also intend to retain outside counsel more generally to advise the corporation once it's up and running. So we are building that into our budget for 2008, the 2008-2009 budget, that we will fund the outside counsel for the corporation. We're also committing to fund the cost of the executive director's salary, whatever that might be, as well as consultants that are necessary for the planning and real estate development work that we imagine that the RRC will need to undertake in its first year of life. We also will provide office space for the River Corporation in its first year of life, and we imagine we will be the sponsoring organization for a number of years while it gets off the ground. So we envision a full work program in that first year, trying to determine the boundaries of the River Corporation's authority, certainly the extent of the Rio plus any other additional right-of-way that makes sense, compiling background materials from the River Master Plan, GIS maps, trying to find a real estate development plan and acquisition plan for the corporation. We want to focus on the 5 opportunity sites identified by the master plan, and we want to work with the River office, as well as the committee, of course, on prioritizing and tracking and promoting key development sites and projects. But again, we are on track to go. We will be having the formation documents drawn up quickly, and we look forward to working with the committee on determining the composition and the appointments of this corporation.
Great. And I want to make sure we get to that threshold sooner than later. So we'll be pushing those decisions as soon as we can. And I also appreciate the fact that you already have it in your mindset that the projects will be presented to this committee so that we can understand how to prioritize them. And my assumptions are that when we look at candidate sites, that we actually have built into that decision, it's just how doable they are in terms of which property owners are cooperating, which sites have already talked about partnerships and that they're ready to move. And the sooner we can get a physical, tangible product in place, a result, I think it'll help with this notion that this could happen. Because we've been gearing up. We've gone through the planning process. I want to prove those people wrong that this master plan is something that's going to be on a shelf, collecting dust, and nothing will happen. That we will actually have very real results. And that's something that I'm looking forward to. So one of the things that would be sharing with my committee colleagues, when I can have more of them here after this budget and scheduling issue, is looking at a plan of action that we can all agree on at the beginning of the year. So that would
July 2008.
after July 2008. So that way we have a sense of a rhythm, understanding how this committee can keep moving in a direction to fulfill these objectives, and hopefully have them in line with Bureau of Engineering's work programs with the bridges. Hopefully the county will be on board in terms of how we can be more efficient in decision making, and actually look at how we can produce through your commitment those real projects, knowing that we have the stewardship of the CRA to help us along. Any comments?
Yeah, I just, in the mapping, when you mentioned, I would think, and I don't know what the number would be, but probably 30% or less of the property is public agency property, whether it's Caltrans and the freeway next to, adjacent thereof, whether it's the City of Los Angeles Recreation and Parks, whether it's Southern California Metrolink, which I don't know if it's a corporation or government corporation or whatever Metrolink is, it's some part of it. I know on the east side of the rail lines in downtown, I believe, are there's like 4 different owners of railroad tracks: Burlington Northern, Union Pacific, Amtrak, and Metrolink. So it'd be interesting to map that just to get a running start, and then also where you have city property too. In North Atwater, you have a pretty good length of the wastewater treatment plant, Glendale Hyperion. You also have the Central Service Yard. Downriver, you have a few smaller yards. You have the big Main Street yard. Distribution station. Distribution stations are key because you can't necessarily move them because where you build them, but how you deal with them. And the right-of-ways, which some of them right-of-ways may predate almost the city's incorporation in some respect. But to look at that from a running start, and the thing I always fear about is when we get this movement going, is those who live in a different environment, who have never really thought of the river as a friend. And I think some people have begun to understand the friendship to the river. And I want to correct myself, Ed, I think it was Mr. Garcetti, but correct me if I'm wrong. He said people often had their back to the river and never did. I know a lot of us say that now, but I think it was Eric that said it first, but I'm not sure.
It's okay, Tom.
All right. Mr. Reyes said it first. Okay. He said it once in a speech in his district that I heard him say it, and I thought it was the first time I ever heard it, so forgive me.
Okay.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Anyway.
The 5 Hail Marys and far.
You got it. But when you get out to the valley, the river changes from a very large right-of-way that has traditionally been somewhat open public land of spontaneous bikeways, et cetera, or horseways in the Grith Park area, to a very much of a narrow trench and heavily landscaped, not coordinated landscape. And so there's a lot of people who are afraid. And we want to take the people, this is a positive, not a negative. And I think the one thing I just want to punch up is the bikeway issue is so important, because once we get the hundreds of people who ride bikes, and what's so amazing right now, and if you all be careful, more people are riding bikes on sidewalks now than ever before, because more people are riding bikes, period, to begin with, and the sidewalk is safer except when there's pedestrians. But then they ride off the sidewalk into the street and back up the sidewalk, which is dangerous because sometimes the contact is there. But if you get them on the river bikeway, it's like a new freeway for bikes. I mean, it's unbelievable. It will be a separated rail for bikes, which is so important. So I think that is a champion thing that we've got to try to get and take back, because some of the land, the river, has been like off limits for everybody, and so people want to keep it off limits. The rebirth of the river is also bringing us back to it and explaining it. So I think identifying what is public, and then also connecting it that we are going to put a bikeway down here. It's ironic, Ed, and we saw this in Washington. This is the Universal City parcel that wanted to block a bikeway. Ironically, and I didn't have nothing to do with this brochure, yet it shows, what can be done at the river. And here you have this big studio that says they don't want the bikeway. Well, and by the way, why the bikeway's on the west is to be away from the horses that are on the east side of the river, and the bridges that have lined up on the always have been on that side of the river, and it's closer to the park, etc. That all being said, I think I've given you a little idea of what to do, Cecilia, and you know it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. As you can see, we're going to try to keep pushing this project along, making sure this committee serves its role in stimulating not only relationships, but trying to reach agreements in terms of working with the jurisdictions and deal with the issues that we need to deal with to make this thing come to life.
And Mr. Chairman, I would project that we should have formation documents for you within 30 to 60 days. And really, then it's just a matter of the appointing authorities making the appointments.
Great.
We're ready to go. We
Okay.
are going to have your legal counsel and consultant money available for you as soon as you appoint the corporation. Once the corporation's appointed, we can get ready to go.
Well, now that you gave me a 30-day target, that's what
30
I'm
to
going to shoot
60
for.
days. It all depends on the city attorney giving us outside counsel. I want to be clear on that.
I just figured if I push 30 days, we might end up in 60 days.
Okay.
But I'm going to push for 30 days
So
to
I'm
be
going to
ready in
ask for
30
your
days.
help if I get a hard
Yes.
time with the city attorney, give me
Yes.
this out to council.
Could I ask you a question? Would you know, and I just thought of this, when you have a public works project, you got to inform the public, right?
Right?
Okay. So when you buy a house or something, you got to inform someone or a property that the public has a plan coming. My point being, is there a way to do a one-stop notification? Anyone who has property along the river should start to be notified now to go to this website to learn about the river, so we're not blindsiding them. I think what happened when we got out of the blocks the last time, everybody said they didn't know anything about the river, and then everybody was screaming. But like, is there any?
But Tom, that I think, I mean, if I give a lot of kudos to the staff because we had so much outreach, and we went through so much creative approaches. We went in different languages. We sent
Right.
flyers. The council office played an instrumental role in looking at all the stakeholders, and even with that, we still had maybe 5 or 10 people saying no one told us. And we documented everything that we did. So it's one of those things where you dance and you take 5 steps forward,
Yeah.
and you take 2 steps back.
But I just
But we
know
keep moving
on the
forward.
Property, I think there's some points where you have to notify, like, let's say I'm selling you a house and the city's building a fire station nearby. I got to tell you when I sell the house that the city has intent of building a fire station next to that property. All I'm just saying is a way to either send a simple letter to the Southern California Association of Realtors saying anybody has property to the river, give them a presentation. Information is knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Give them a presentation. I'm not asking you to jump through any hoops, but give them a presentation so they could go, and it's a positive. This is going to be increase the value of one's land with this new public works improvement
Right.
that is coming to us.
I appreciate what you're,
Yeah.
what you're saying, and we should. It's a disclosure statement.
Yeah,
saying,
disclosure, that's the
so when we look at disclosure statements, but we're very cognizant that, like you have mentioned, there's corridors, sections within the corridor where people did not want more people coming there.
Right.
And that we respected. So the nodes that you see right now that are prioritized is with that in mind.
Right.
To avoid those elected officials who are saying, absolutely not, I don't want anything disturbed in my district. We respected that. The areas that said that they were interested in some kind of change, we tried to fit that in within the master plan. And that we will continue to do that. But I think a disclosure statement is something healthy. The thing that I did want to ask, and it came back to me, is I believe we had one more parcel left for the bike path that would go from Fletcher to, I believe, closer to the Golden State Freeway. I'm sorry, the Pasadena Freeway, that leg. We have one property left.
I believe,
Was that resolved
yes, I believe it was,
in January? So what are we waiting for now? Do we know?
Goes to construction in June.
Thank you, Joe. All right, our bike advocate. So in June, you said?
That's what the DOT is saying. They're going to meet with some groups in Elysian Valley. They say they're 100% done with design. Sorry, should I?
Just come on up, Joe. Introduce yourself. You don't have to say you're a former CD1 employee.
I'm Joe Linton with Livable Places, formerly Friends of the River. Yeah, the city went in court in January. They're supposedly 100% of design, but that hasn't been shared with bicyclists or with neighbors. So they're going to do some work to share those designs with folks in Elysian Valley and bicyclists, and then supposedly go to construction this summer.
So if we can get the city clerk or the CLA to have DOT brief us in the next meeting with that Hoc River, I'd like to get a status on that and get a design and have them review this issue. And
Michelle
and
Mowry and Mike May.
we should have him here for what would be one of the agenda items. Councilman Garcetti, I'm hoping could make it at that meeting because he's always here. But this impacts directly his district, and it impacts mine because we're trying to fit the bridge to go over the river, which is another meeting with the MTA. But that's something we need to come through with.
I think that's real important.
Thank you, Joe.
You do have Michelle Mowry here in DOT, because it's kind of, if they're not here, then they're doing their work and we don't know about it. And the other thing, too, is maybe the same meeting to get agendized the DWP bikeway, because the question we should ask ourselves, right now, the bikeway goes from Griffith Park onto Forest Lawn Drive. And now with the work of the Department of Water and Power and the Silver Lake replacement tanks, We could ask for the bikeway to get to the river, which pushes it up towards Universal.
Beautiful.
And gets people off Forest Lawn
Okay.
Drive, which is a nice drive when there's no cars on it.
Okay. Okay. No other questions in here for public comment? I see no cards. Thank you so much. This meeting is adjourned.